That's called the Cavendish banana, and they're actually very threatened right now because of disease, because they propagate them. Bananas don't really have seeds. They're propagated by pups, so you cut them at the base, and then you move them. There's also tissue cloning, which is another way of producing them, and then there's something that we do on the island. I forget the exact term for it. Macro propagation. So micro propagation is when you tissue clone. Macro propagation is when you cut a banana, put it in soil, and then it like reproduces. So it's the poor man's tissue culture is what Jay Reynolds on the island calls it. Anyway, so we have hundreds of bananas right now that we've collected from different people. You got to clean the corn. The corn is what you actually plant. It's the bottom, the root ball, if you will. Bananas also aren't truly trees, so I just call them banana plants. They're actually a giant herb, and once a banana produces fruit, you have to cut it down, which is kind of convenient because it's the easiest way to get the banana down. But also, if you don't, it'll just rot because a banana plant only produces once in its lifetime. So it puts all its work in. People don't realize that, they leave it up, but their shoots, their children will reproduce. So you want to spread those out. If you have a whole clump of them, they won't grow as well. So bananas are cannibals, and the best thing to feed a banana is another banana. So you cut the banana tree and then split it in half and put it down around the tree to give it mulch. So they're very heavy feeders. You can throw your food, your gray water, like you guys were talking about, from your sinks on the bananas, and they will love it. Can't overfeed a banana. Papaya. The hurricane killed all our papaya trees, but we will plant more. Papaya grow well from seeds. Another thing, papaya actually, there's a native papaya to Florida. And it was one of the staple crops. They say the Calusa were not farmers. From what I've heard and read and talked to people, I don't know how that's possible that you can't be a farmer, because they say they were just fishermen. But really, farming is food fodder feed, right? That's what makes a farmer a farmer. You're gathering from the earth and you're giving back to the earth. So by saving seeds from a papaya, whether intentionally or subconsciously saying, this papaya tastes better than that papaya, I'm going to replant these seeds, or just grow where you like them, that's reproducing. So I think the best farmers are squirrels. Really, they hide their nuts and then they grow again, and that's a really good return on your investment, I've got to say. Okay, so this might be the most relevant to your class, what we're doing to reduce greenhouse gases. So I know that this is a sustainability class, so these are a few things that we're doing to reduce greenhouse gas on a large scale. Preventing deforestation. By taking marginalized land, we can grow crops on them. We don't need to cut down the forest to grow palm oil, and corn and soybeans. That's what's typically happening. You cut down the forest, in the rainforest, North America, everywhere. Forests are cut down, the trees are used for fiber, and then in goes a monocrop. So we're trying to prevent that by using already marginalized land. We're planting native plant zones. So a native plant zone can be a windbreak, which surrounds the farm and actually stops the wind from coming in. And it can be a pollinator garden, it can be a lot of different ways. We're sequestering carbon. Sequestering carbon means that we're taking carbon from the atmosphere, what we breathe out or what our gas pipes in our cars breathe out, and then what the plants breathe in. So us and plants are actually in reciprocity with each other, which means that what we breathe out, they breathe in, what they breathe out, we breathe in. So that comes out of the air and into the ground, into the plants themselves. We're reducing freight by making domestically produced tropical produce available. That needs to be shorter. But basically, we're trying to bring stuff that you can buy a papaya in the store, but it's probably from Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, somewhere like that. Jackfruit's probably from Sri Lanka. Coconuts are probably from coconut waters, mostly from the Philippines and Thailand. All these things can be grown in South Florida. We have the soil and climate for it. but we're bringing it in because it's easier and it's grown on mass scales in monocrops. So we're trying to reduce that. We're improving the soil fertility. Improved soil fertility is very important to farming. In fact, I would argue that improving soil fertility is what makes a farm a farm. If you're just extracting fertility from the soil, like in corn plantations, this might be a little controversial to say, but you're not really a farm, you're a mine. You're extracting. That's what mining is, it's extracting without giving back. So we're farming by improving soil fertility, mainly by using mulch and compost. We're reducing harmful pollution into the ocean and waterways. And that's something people in Tampa know about. Carenia brevis, red tide, right? That's a big problem up here. Down by us too, but basically the non-point or point for that big outbreak last year. Was that last year up here when it was really bad? Can't keep track of time. Now it's largely due to the release from Piney Point phosphate mine, an abandoned mine that was used to help agriculture, but neglected, and then the water went into Tampa Bay, and just like those crops like that food, so does that microorganism, Carenia brevis, which actually might be responsible for life on Earth, but that's a whole other story. So we're reducing the need for phosphate mining, as I said. We're using native plants as windbreak. So we're going to be planting things like sea grape, some bamboos. There is native bamboo to Florida and the United States. People don't realize this, but bamboo is native to every continent except Antarctica, or a variety of bamboo is. We're planting these windbreaks that surround the farm. The secret to a good windbreak is porosity. That's a fun word. You want to have the wind be able to come through, but to be dappled by your windbreak. So if it's just stopped like a wall, if the wind's strong enough like an Ian, it'll break everything, or worse, it'll come over and create like, you ever see those car commercials where it's with the waves and whatever, or airplanes or whatever, it'll create some kind of vortex and suck all your stuff out. So we're protecting land from high density urban development. This is prime real estate that we're occupying in Southwest Florida. It's going like hotcakes, the real estate in market in South Florida, as we all have seen. Just in my lifetime, I fled Hurricane Ian, but really I fled the east coast of Florida to come to the west coast of Florida because of the development going on there. What was parks and ocean and beachfront is now one giant city on the east coast. And unfortunately, it's starting to look that way here too, but we're trying to protect by putting valuable real estate to use. Basically, you can't put a cornfield in the middle of a neighborhood because that land is worth more as a house than it is as a cornfield. But if you plant multiple species of trees, high quality produce, then that field can actually be more economically viable. We're recharging the aquifers with low draining soil. At least I really, really hope so. So that means that the aquifer, the Floridan aquifer, runs underneath 90% of Florida. Most of South Florida, there's different layers of the aquifer. They present itself as springs. Springs were actually endemic to South Florida, all over. Miami used to have springs. There would be springs in the Everglades. Still, what's the closest spring here? Anyone know?
Crystal Springs?
Crystal River, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Crystal Springs?
Maybe? It's like an hour north?
An hour north, yeah. So we're at spring country, a little bit south of spring country here. But the springs used to pop up down here too. I'm talking about a long time ago. But in our lifetime, if we work to put water from the air back into the soil and then up again through tree roots, does everyone know that trees make rain?
Yeah.
It's not the other way around. So that's a fun thing to say. Rain doesn't make trees make rain. But we're trying to recharge these aquifers and put the water from these rainstorms, these once in 100-year rainstorms that we seem to get every 2 years, and take it down and put it into the soil. and bring that water level back up. So wetland rehabilitation and mitigation, basically when construction happens on a wetland in Florida, spoiler alert, all of Florida is actually a wetland. You have to buy what's called wetland credits or through wetland mitigation banks. And my dad's old company actually was one of the pioneers in helping companies do this, where you are offsetting, so like carbon offsets are a hot topic now. That's actually an old concept in Florida. Florida has a lot of unique environmental rules. They're slowly disappearing, but we do have them, and they're to help protect the environment. So when you see wetland mitigation area, what that means is that developers bought credits for destroying a wetland to improve another wetland or create a wetland or enhance a wetland. So what are some climate-friendly, financial, viable farming practices? Who wants to say that 3 times fast? So basically, this is our pathway to increase revenue, right? So increased revenue can look different to different people. This is specifically talking about financial revenue, so there's different forms of capital. This is monetary form of capital. So we're combining old and new farming practices, right? We're using modern equipment. Right now, all our equipment is diesel powered, unfortunately, because when I looked into it, the electric equipment is just almost there. It's so close. And we're pre-ordering some equipment, hopefully soon. So that way, like the boom lift you saw, we're gonna be getting a hybrid, maybe a fully electric one in the next year or 2. Nice. There's an electric excavator I've been working to try to procure, and then there's an electric skid steer, and the Monarch tractor just came out with an electric tractor.
Really?
There's a couple of companies, there's also the Celeste track that have electric tractors. So right now we're using diesel because we need it to work and we need it to work well. But basically in farming, when you use electric, there's a lot less unpredictable cost other than maintenance, because you're gonna be knowing how much your energy is costing. And if you use solar panels, then you can do, like, you can drastically lower your energy costs. Because like diesel farming, or diesel vehicles, when the price doubled in the last year, basically it, sure that affects us at the gas pump when we're driving our cars, but think about when you're using so much diesel, thousands of gallons of diesel a year, how much that affects your bottom line. You're doubling your inputs. So we're trying to provide financial benefits to growers, and to do that, we've got to educate them and adapt these practices to different growers. So what we do in South Florida isn't the same as what we would do in North Florida, isn't the same as what we do in New York, or in the next venture is Date Forest in California. So it's not the same and has to be adapted to that region. And then we're trying to increase yield with fewer purchased inputs. So the big blessing of Hurricane Ian for us was all the mulch. I don't have a picture of it in here, but it's just like, imagine 600 feet, so that's about half, 2/3 of a football field, right? I like the football field. It's almost, so imagine a football field filled with mulch. It's that, maybe 3/4. But so we have over 100 trucks dumped, 100 of like semi trucks dumped mulch there, and all over the island they're delivering this mulch. So I hope people get on the list to get the free mulch, which has some trash in it, and you have to go through hoops because we're organic certified. We have to have them signs and paperwork, but for the most part, what we're planning on doing is putting water lines on top of it and pumping in EM, effective microbes, and maybe even mixing in compost from local grocery stores, and maybe even seaweed. That's going to be my secret ingredient if I can get it from the local rich people beach scrapers. They have to scrape the beaches to look good, so from the seaweed. So to mix that in, it's really high nitrogen. So basically, none of that's purchased though. That's waste product, right? So the mulch was delivered to us because we had to get rid of it. These big mountains of mulch will catch on fire. They do every year. if they're left to be, 10, 20 feet high. So, as you probably know, yeah, yeah, they spontaneously combust, which is, I don't know if it's technically spontaneously combustion, but
because of the amount of heat that is generated by just the pressure and the microorganisms that are living in there, and because they are always active, it creates more and more heat. That's why we as a whole flip our compost as well as our mulch piles because of the risk of self-ignition, which is, you wouldn't think that like food can just catch on fire like that, but it happens.
Yeah.
The same thing happens with hay bales. You bale them wet, and then they dry out. And the same thing happens when it's too dense, and then it just pops.
Yeah, biology is creating fires. It's crazy. But, it's like, yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. Fire as an element is so powerful and can be used in so many good ways. Like you can make biochar. I see a lot of nods for biochar. Yeah, so biochar, the basic building block of human life, is carbon, can be put back into the soil as an amendment. It's not actually a fertilizer, and the best way, you have to activate it to get the best results, but the best way to do that I found is peeing on it. Whatever. So anyway, we're trying to use fewer purchase inputs to grow our food and to put our inputs back into using the compost, using the husks from the coconuts, whole bunch of different ways to minimize our inputs. And then we're trying to partner with research organizations to quantify cost benefits. So TSIP, which is the Soil Inventory Project, I think I got it right, funded by Al Gore's Climate Initiative project. I can't remember the name of it, but it's backed by Al Gore and a bunch of other names in the climate world. And they go out and quantify how much soil are we actually sequestering. So hopefully this year they'll be coming out and taking soil samples from the side that we've modified, where we planted. So half of the farm we're working on right now, or less than half, but hopefully by the end of this year we'll have half of it really cleaned up and we'll have planted a bunch of stuff. Take soil samples from there, take soil samples from the untouched part, and then compare how much carbon have we sequestered, or how much carbon have we given off, so they can actually figure out, are we actually benefiting it? It's one thing to say that all these practices are benefiting the environment, but that's where the scientists come in to tell us, are they? Because why would we preach something if it's not even really doing anything, or worse, it's creating negative effect. Yeah. A quick story about that is that I'm from South Florida, so I grew up in Cooper City, which is by Fort Lauderdale. My dad grew up in Miami. His Boy Scout project was planting Florida holly. Anyone know what Florida holly is? It's more commonly referred to today as Brazilian pepper. Yep. So Brazilian pepper.
I'm just kidding.
Well, not just my dad, but he didn't plant all of it. But
He did every single one. He ate the seeds and spit them out to every island.
So him and his Boy Scouts would go out as a beautification project and plant this Brazilian pepper, Florida holly, excuse me. And then my Boy Scout project was going out and cutting down all this Brazilian pepper with machetes and hacksaws and whatever else we could find. I don't know how they let us do that because we had too much fun with it. But it's a nuisance. It'll get under skin. It's related to poison ivy and has urethol in it, which can irritate your skin. Some people are fine. Some people it really disturbs. You don't want to burn it because if you breathe in that urethol, so there's toxic brush piles on fire. You don't want to be breathing those in. There's no pepper in there.
It smells good when you cut it down.
I like the smell, yeah. The pepper actually, some people can eat it and it has like the red pepper flakes, it's like that. I don't recommend it because those alternatives, you have an allergic reaction to it. But recently I saw my dad's Boy Scout friend who I hadn't seen in a few years, and I was telling him that story that, oh yeah, I'm cutting down all this Brazilian pepper that you guys planted as kids. He's like, that stuff grew? I'm like, let me tell you, did it ever? But yeah, so we're using permaculture. That's my guiding light. There's several different concepts and principles, and there's different theories about how you can go about sustainable agriculture. the academic pursuit of permaculture may have heard of agroecology. So agroecology is kind of the study of systems, and it's more taught in schools and used by the United Nations now a lot more than permaculture, but it can be incorporated into permaculture. Permaculture is a design system and design science. First, the term was coined by Bill Mollison and David Omgren, and two Australians. One was the teacher, one was the student. So, you know, you can talk to your professor and come up with a term for something cool. But yeah, so this professor-student relationship is a lot of things for these principles being taught in thousands and thousands and thousands of farms and to many, many people every year through permaculture design courses, which is a 72-hour course, which teaches you how to do this stuff and design landscape based on earth care, people care, and fair share, or what I would like to call future care. It's kind of the terminology varies depending on who you talk to, but basically earth care, we're giving back to the earth, we're taking care of the earth, people care, we're taking care of our neighbors. You know, that's the guiding principle of a lot of religions, love thy neighbor, and we're taking care of the future. We're sharing in the surplus, that's the other term. We're sharing in the surplus with each other for future generations. The Iroquois, which the proper term is the Seven Nations, right? Wow, what's the proper term for Iroquois? What's that?
We can search it real quick.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the Iroquois Confederacy that affected our development of our own constitution. But you're right, there's a different name. They're not really the Iroquois, it's the...
I talk about in my documentary, and I just...
Yeah,
mind
but-
blank.
Mind blank. We have oracles, these guys.
Onondaga, Oneida.
Those are the 7 tribes, but what's the term for all of them?
Haudenosaunee?
Haudenosaunee, thank you.
Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee Confederacy.
Yeah.
The Haudenosaunee Confederacy believes in the 7th generation. What we do now affects 7 generations down the line. So that's kind of rooted in permaculture design, which takes from a lot of different indigenous cultures. One criticism people have is it doesn't do enough to credit where each concept comes from. So while Bill Mollison spent a lot of time with Aboriginal people in Australia and Native American people in North America, he doesn't always contribute what comes from where. But a food forest is a concept in permaculture. So there's lots of different things lots of different principles, but a food forest is a term that refers to a self-sustaining system of growing edible plants mimicking a forest ecosystem. The food forest is built in succession according to 7 layers of vegetation, and it's made out of guilds or plants which support each other. So a food forest is basically trying to replicate those effects of how a forest works. The 7 layers starting from the roots, like sweet potatoes, and then going all the way up to the canopy tree. The canopy tree can be coconuts, tree, or it can be mangoes, and then there's under that is an understory of bananas. Well, there's herbaceous layer of smaller plants, and then there's shrub layers, so you can picture any kind of fruit that's a shrub. And every single layer gives us a yield. A yield in farming is not always edible. It can be something that's aesthetically pleasing, so flowers for giving to a lovely lady, or it can be something like fruit, or it can be anything that gives us pleasure. So that's what a food forest is. A guild is the most common example of a guild is the 3 sisters, corn, bean, and squash. The corn would grow straight up, the beans bring nitrogen from the air from the atmosphere into the soil, benefiting the corn, and then the squash would grow under it in the shade, and then the beans would also use the corn as a trellis, coming full circle. So each plant has its role and benefits each other. This goes back to things, not to get into the politics of Thanksgiving, but basically that was one of the things that the pilgrims were trying to learn with the Three Sisters. So I use a program called SketchUp. This is really fun. SketchUp is kind of like a CAD software, computer assisted design, and it's not always used by professional engineers because it's kind of scoffed at, that's kind of childish, but it has a lot of functions that you can export it into any format that a professional will use. More and more it's becoming accepted as it was bought by Trimble, which is a big company. It was owned by Google at one point. But anyway, it has a lot of ability. So what I do is I use a program called Maps Plus, and this is actually where each coconut tree is on the farm, that picture right there. So we mapped out where each coconut tree was, and then I brought it into this 3D software. And then we put a coconut tree in each place, and then I can say, okay, so then I can put a banana here, I can put a jackfruit there, I can put a, whatever, wherever. And now I figured out a way to bring it into Unreal Engine, which is the competitor of Unity, and you can do VR with it, or AR, or augmented reality. You can make a video game out of it. It's not working on my computer right now. I was going to show you. I actually took the farm and video gameized it. So I can take my video game controller, my Xbox controller, just fly over the farm and fly around the farm. So it's a work in progress. But it's a concept I'm trying to show that actually it has a lot of value to be able to see what goes where when you're. It's one thing if you're planting an apple orchard, okay, every 10 feet there's an apple tree, or every 5 feet there's an orange tree. But when you're trying to do things intercrop, you need to know what goes where, so you can figure out, make decisions based off of the height of things and the shade that's provided, where the sun sector is. So all these things I'm taking from permaculture, which is taking very old concepts and bringing it into modern concepts of computer assistance.
Can I just interrupt there? Andrew and Kaylin are in the climate class now where we're in the 3D Access Lab. We are using Blender because SketchUp still has a cost barrier when you want to export to different file formats, right? But the same thing, nobody in this space uses, Blender's used by artists, but we're using it for this, and we're using Unity instead of Unreal Engine, and we talked about that on Sunday. Austin, you were in the class last semester.
Envisioning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have 2 classes, Climate and Envisioning, that go on in the 3D Access Lab, and it would just be really beneficial for our audience, both of students and people who will be watching this, if you could emphasize as an entrepreneur and as a farmer why the visualization is so important, because it's sort of alien to the rest of the campus and the sustainability program.
So, there's a few reasons. One is that very practical, on the ground. I have a vision of being able to put an AR set on one day when you're on the field and being like, oh wow, this coconut tree is going to have a banana here, and there's going to be a tree here, and this there, and you can walk around and see what the farm's actually going to look like. And you can put it, and then in real time, making decisions like, oh, this shouldn't go here because the soil's like this. So you're working with the computer to actually figure out what goes where. The other thing is if you're trying to bring in money and bring people on board and educate people, you want to show them what the potential is, right? You want to show them what things can look like. So it would take 10 years to grow all this stuff, which is, we need to show people now what this can look like. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because we're just starting this program here, and Joe Dorsey was with us, and you were with us out at the bull market, and we just set up our bull market pavilion today with curtains all around it so that the Oculus would finally work, because it doesn't work in the sunlight. And we were under there, and you got a chance to see our inchoate version of Rosebud Continuum's food forest, walking in the path of a bear, and just want to encourage you all, hearing it from professionals in the field, how important this and the growing job market, the need for people who know how to visualize these future scenarios, and that you all plunge into it, even though it will cost you time. And I'm willing to support that with credit points, but really whether you're in my classes or not, to just see this as the road for sustainability representation, whether you use SketchUp or use Unreal Engine or Unity, you'll get the same sort of feel. But the fact when we met and you started talking about it, I was like, oh gosh, this is important from a career point of view. And
And really take advantage of those student discounts while you can. They're so great. I think SketchUp has like a very good student plan. I use a program called DataSmith, which allows you to bring in the program to Unreal Engine, which is a free program, and that's what's used to make Fortnite, for example. Epic Games is the company that owns it, but basically you can make any video game with it. Imagination and time and willpower is your limitation.
It's a good lesson for life.
Yeah.
And
Imagination, time, and willpower.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, we dropped our textbook charge. We don't use textbooks in our program deliberately. I think some of the teachers recommend them, but in most classes you have to buy a textbook, which is like $150 or something. We're asking you to think about investing in a VR headset, and even if it makes you dizzy, like Kaylin bought one early on, and it makes you dizzy, right? You suffer from that. But getting involved out the gate with these, your brain understanding how visualization is occurring, to spend $300 or $400, while you're a graduate student and play around with it, so you're conversant in this. Like, so you can say, well, what would it look like to a possible investor who came in? How would you set it up so that they could have that experience? That's the kind of knowledge that you'll need, as opposed to, I heard about XR and people using it, but you won't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of funny, like all this technology, it changes so fast. Like Bitcoin's already an outdated technology. Like these things that I grew up with. I'm gonna like date myself now. I grew up playing Game Boys.
Yes.
Yeah. They were awesome. So it changes so fast that when you're a youngin', back in my day, we had, no, I'm not that old. But anyway, but it does evolve so quickly, and that you really want to take advantage of learning how to learn the program. So even more so, you can get stuck. We were talking about Unreal Engine versus Unity. For a while, I used to do a lot of video production, and people get caught up. Oh, Final Cut, Premiere Pro. Well, the concepts are the same. So you learn how to learn a program, and then you can really take that and translate it into any program. Yeah. So back to the farm. I'll just show this real quick. This is what our windbreak looks like currently. It's a Bismarck tree. A lot of these fell down from the storm, but they did their job and protected the plants we planted. These are a list of some of the native windbreaks. If you guys know who David the Good is, he's the survival gardener. He's like a Florida. I don't think he lives in Florida anymore, but he has a YouTube channel where he shows how to garden. It's really fun. He's just like, he's a comedian, he's gardener, it's great. But yeah, so live oak, sunshine, mimosa, sumac, wild grape, wild mint, bee balm, resurrection, fir, expansion olive. So anyway, these are stuff that we can grow. And then this is a list of some of the windbreaks I mentioned earlier. Seagrave, pumpkin nebbill. Gumbo limbo is awesome. It's a Florida native. I think it grows up here, right? Anyone know? So gumbo limbo is like a big tree that you see on the beach with peeling bark. They call it a tourist tree because it looks like a tourist with a sunburn. It has red bark.
Hold on, wait. Don't go past.
Camphor is not native. This is where do you see?
In the windbreak
last
hilltop.
one. Oh yeah. So this is the left is native stuff. The right is not native. Not necessarily native. Some of it is native, but this is the idea of a guild. So planting these trees together, planting some of these trees will actually help benefit the ecosystem.
Is it okay if I take a photo of that?
Yeah, this isn't a great list. There's better lists that I have, but you're welcome to take pictures or whatever.
I can send you the photos.
So is this sea grape, is that native?
Yes.
Sweet.
Governor's Child's son, Ed Childs, who runs the Sandbar restaurant and several other restaurants on Anna Maria Island called the greenest little main street in America, He's got sea grape growing all around the restaurant, and he makes dishes out of the sea grape. It's
Really?
yeah.
That's awesome. Where is this?
This is on Anna Maria Island.
Oh, I gotta check that out.
Yeah, you'll love Ed.
Sea grapes,
as well.
you can eat them.
Stuff, right?
They kind of taste like, they look like a grape, but they taste more like, they don't really have much of a taste, in my opinion. But you can make, I've heard of people making wine out of them. I don't know if that's true, but, you can definitely make stuff out of them. Big pit in the middle, so you gotta be careful chewing on it.
Which is that the same as sea almond?
No, sea almond is different. Sea almond is spiky has like a spiky, outside.
Right. Because do they grow them here? Because I experienced them in Belize, but maybe they're not.
Sea almonds grow in Florida, yeah.
They do grow in Florida.
There's different varieties of them.
We're trying to get Dane Watts, your fellow student from PCGS, who's still in the program after 4 years. He's taken the slow road because he's working at the same time. He's got the 2 greenhouses at Rosebud where he's in charge of the plant sale that we're doing, and he does the grafting for our mangoes and our avocado trees. I just purchased a sea grape for him to put on the property at Rosebud. I've also got the clumping bamboo, and Nathan, your other fellow student who lives on the property, and I we learned from Andy Firk this Sunday when we were down there that our clumping bamboo is not growing well because we just planted it in sandy soil and it doesn't have any nutrients. So we went around today and put the mulch that the arborists are collecting for us from the oak cuttings that we're doing to get the widowmakers out. So we have tons of mulch there. We need your guys' labor to go up and plant more bamboo. Andy's offered you can go down to Arcadia and get all sorts of different varieties and bring them up. He's got the most incredible ones, but there's also Kenny Coogan, a former PCGS student who lives in Temple Terrace. He's got a bamboo grove. That's where I got mine from. We've been invited. Nathan's going to go this Saturday with a saw and start cutting roots out and clumps to bring it up to Rosebud. We've got to build the bamboo grove sheltering that you were talking about. And who's the fella who was in the blue shirt, who's a friend of Andy's, who was also talking about his bamboo? You know, do you know the other guy who was speaking early on with Andy and is an expert and has his own bamboo grove?
I don't know. Maybe it wasn't Matt.
Maybe it was.
Matt Reese has like a lot of stuff.
He was there on Sunday.
He's one of my mentors. I don't. He might have been there before I got there, but I didn't see him.
Do you remember you guys? Did you meet him? Anyway, he said, and I videotaped him, so it's on Facebook, but I didn't get his name, that the only reason his house is standing after the hurricane is because it was surrounded by giant clumping bamboo.
Oh yeah, I forget his name.
What's Sean?
Sean, is that his
Is
name?
it the vermicompost guy?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Sean. Yeah.
Sean, yeah. So Sean was saying, he said, I would have been flattened, but I have this bamboo. And so, as you said, the windbreak, it lets the air through so it doesn't go up and become a microburst, but it mitigates it. And that's the only reason his place survived. We've got to get all of Rosebud surrounded by that because we were affected by a microburst that made it, my roof was hit by a massive limb because of a microburst. The other thing is I brought in pitaya, so we have some pitaya. I also brought in sugarcane. The neem tree I brought in died, and Dane brought in a lychee. So we're getting there, but as you know, it's about having the people there to plant, to look after, to tend, to mulch, to fertilize.
Yeah, maintenance is a big part of it. A lot of permaculture projects fail after a few years. And failure is not always the right word because a lot of times you plant a food forest and then there's not maintenance done, and it kind of goes wild, which isn't always a bad thing. You can come in and with a few hours of maintenance on a small scale of food forest, you can clean it up. But a lot of times, if there's not a dedicated crew to, it'll be turned into houses one day. So, yeah. I'll move on kind of quickly from this because my time is probably about up. But these are some cover crops. Cover crops are really important to farming. You plant them. There's a couple different ways you can plant cover crops. You can up north they plant them in the winter or late fall, and then. Yeah, this is a good list of cover crops for Florida. I like moso flower, which is also called powder puff flower. It's these pink flowers, and they make really beautiful cover crops. Another one is what's it called? Perennial peanut.
Yeah, we have that at
Yeah,
Rosebud.
that's really, University of Florida, IFAS is doing a lot of work to try to get that into people's yards because it's, very drought tolerant and, you can do a lot with it. These are some native plants here, and then, these are some pollinator ones, yeah.
Can we get buckwheat anywhere around here?
Buckwheat, yeah, you can go to the store and buy a bag of buckwheat and actually plant the seeds.
Okay.
Yeah, buckwheat's fun. I love buckwheat. Not everyone likes the taste of it, but it's a pseudo grain and really good for you. But
The best creperies when we went to southern France last summer were the crêpes sarrasin, which is the blé noir, which is buckwheat. It has no gluten. It's not a wheat. It's a Phagopyrum esculenta. It's a flowering plant. It's not a grass. It's delicious, and the bees love the flowers.
yeah, a lot of people will plant buckwheat and then cut it before it's ready to harvest, just to cover the ground in between planting, growing wheat and stuff, or any other crop. But I think if you can let it go to seed and harvest it, you get a lot from a small area. But it's pretty labor intensive if you don't have the tools for it.
Mike, have you heard of the roller crimper? It's like an adapter you can put on the front of a tractor.
Yeah, on BCS, on a small tractor like that you push behind. Yeah, those are cool. That's the market garden, I think, talks about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just adding more organic matter, but sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. That's awesome, yeah. So fire, it's awesome. We're burning stuff to make wood ash. This is Joe Pierce. That's not him in the picture, but that's at his place. He's a biochar expert up in Micanopy. If anyone's been to Micanopy, it's the farm stand there. So he kind of teaching me how to make biochar. This is a little misleading, it's not the same picture. But yeah, so this is some benefits of how we're digging up the soil and putting it on there. So tilling is bad, right, because it releases methane and gas, that's kind of a blanket statement, but, and disturbs the soil. So there's low till method where you don't disturb the soil a lot, and then there's one-time till where you disturb the soil to prepare it, and then you only cover it from there on out and keep adding organic matter. So what we found was that when you dig down deep, the soil is really rich, but when you go up top, the soil is really sandy. So it's like the opposite of temperate climates and everywhere else in the world, not except for Florida, freak state. You know, we have sandy soil on top, and then on the bottom, it's rich. So we're bringing that rich soil up, and then we're using the ditches to flow out water all throughout Pine Island, ditches and swales, and the ditches were just designed to get water as quick as you can off to the side. So we fill up some of the ditches that we pull out the rich soil with compost, with debris that we got from local landscapers, and then and from our trees, and then that has turned back into soil in the one ditch that we filled it up. One of the other ditches we kind of neglected while it was harvesting, and there was a hurricane and all that, and now it's kind of a wetland, so it has cattails already growing in it, and there's little minnows in it. Like, I think they're fish, but how did they get in there? It's not connected to anything. Was that birds? Yeah, or they just fall from the sky. So yeah, we're using them to prepare biochar. We're gonna try burning some stuff in there. Lots of uses for ditches.
Before you leave that, we're doing berming at Rosebud, and I tried once. I took a tractor and made a swale, and then Marianne had it covered up because she felt that it was going to create an insect mosquito breeding ground. How are you dealing with that?
So I took
wanted to
that slide out of this presentation. I had a slide for hugelkultur, I think is what you're talking about. So hugelkultur is German for mountain culture, so hugelkultur. That's my attempt at a German accent. It's okay, I'm more German. So hugelkultur is when you mound up usually logs, and it's done in swamps, right? Typically Germany, and Europe, Eastern Europe is where it was historically done. Seth Holzer kind of pioneered large-scale hugelkultur in modern times. So if you look that name up, you'll see really beautiful ponds he's made with it. But the idea is that you make a mound, you cover it with soil, and then you plant on it, and then that can be used as, you can incorporate that with a ditch behind it so that it catches the water, providing fertility downhill from it. Well, there's two problems with that. in Florida. One, we don't have hills, well, I guess in Tampa they do, but where Miami don't. And two, we don't have soil, we have sand. So the sand actually will just fall off, exposing the thing. So if you don't get it covered up or add a lot of topsoil, it's not really economically viable to do it in Florida. I wanted to do a whole project on Melaleuca hugelkultur, which is another invasive plant.
But so you're suggesting to do it then on the downslope side of the hugel, and then you're saying it's swaled, lay it out on contour,
On contour.
it percolates in. How would you keep, so Marianne's saying she's willing to experiment with it again, but how do you keep the mosquito issue?
So mosquitoes thrive when they're standing water.
Right.
So you don't ever want water to be standing except for more than 3 days. Because on that third day, the mosquito larvae hatch. So mosquito day 1, the mosquito lays its eggs. Day 2, the eggs are forming. Day 3, they hatch. And I might be slightly off with the numbers, but if that water stands for 3 days and then it soaks into the soil, the mosquito larva is going to be on the ground and die or be eaten by other critters. Flowing water, mosquito larvae will wash away. You also want to encourage dragonflies and other things. That's also why you don't want bromeliads, even though they're beautiful to some people. They are perfect. They're like these little cups where the mosquitoes lay their larvae and then they hatch and fly around, but nothing can get into the bromeliad because it's spiky to eat the mosquito larva. So bromeliads, farming, everything are bad. Mosquitoes are the second most deadly animal in the world. They kill more humans. They kill more humans than any other animal other than humans. Yeah. So this is here. This is a picture of how hugelkultur works in an ideal system. But the swale, it's soaking into that hill, and then on top of it you can have your fruit trees, or on the back side of it you have your fruit trees, and then on this side you have the water soaking in. So the contour thing is really important. When I was teaching at a summer camp, we would go out and use A-frames that we handmade from trees we selectively thinned from the forest, and an A-frame is basically a frame like this with a rock hanging from it. So that's some old technology that you go out and then you can balance the rock to find out where the line is. If you don't know what contour is, basically it's when you look at a hiking map and it's like wavy like that, that's because the contour line is where the flatness is. So every hill has a contour, or every landscape has a contour. You just have to find it. And there's ways of using laser levels and stuff now to do that, but the A-frame is the old school way. Alright. So this is our deep tilling plan. We use an excavator. We clean, we mow the grass, because yes, we have some Bidenvalva and native weeds. A weed is a plant whose virtue has not yet been realized, or as Alex Ojeda calls it, a wild ecological edible design system.
Wow.
Wild edible ecological design system.
Ecological design.
Design system.
I like that.
Of course, the Monsanto definition is a plant out of place, but every plant is an indicator of something of what your soil needs or is lacking or has. So it's not random that you have a certain weed in a certain place. It's trying to tell you something. You can learn from it. And a lot of times you can eat it, but we have a lot of Caesar weed, which is
We
these
too.
little stickers that's why I wear jeans all the time now, because when you walk around, they don't stick to the jeans, but they stick to everything else. I mean, they still stick to the jeans a little bit. But yeah, so that's a nuisance to us. But the flower has, so the little pink flowers, which some people think are really pretty, I agree. And they give you, I think Andy told me that it takes 2 calories of energy to get 1 calorie of nutrition from the flower. So 2 calories, and then you get 1 calorie of nutrition. It's like the celery, it has a negative effect on you. But the seeds have been used in Africa as famine food. They're those little spiky things. They crack them open and they can cook them. So where there's been famines, people have eaten these seeds, and actually it's not the greatest, but they've actually helped people survive.
Really?
Yeah.
Because Sonny's pulling, one of the big things for 7 years is pulling all the Caesar weed, and of course it keeps coming back.
Yeah, it's
And
not-
I argued it must have a function, but we're trying to get rid of it. I didn't know that, because if we can turn it into some exhibit at Rosebud, right, Michaela and guys, and have it,
I wouldn't
that
recommend
lore there.
planting it, but you don't really have to plant
Yeah, no,
it.
we have too much of it.
It sticks on you, you walk, and then it says, yay, and it falls and it grows somewhere else. You know, as you're picking it off, and you're like, oh, then you just throw this on the ground, you're just making a problem somewhere else. But, that is the plant's function.
So it's non-toxic, or do you have to prepare it in some way?
I don't know too much about it. Eat the Weeds is a good resource for, Green Bean from Floridian. He has a website called eattheweeds.org or .com, I forget, but. Yeah, so Eat the Weeds is a way of telling you how to, prepare these plants and what you do with it. Every plant has its function. There's a story that I've heard from, herbalists and Ayurveda practitioners, where this, the greatest herbalist teacher, goes out and tells his students, you know, now it is your final exam. You must go out and find me 2 plants that have no function that have no function in the environment. So everyone goes out and then they come back with this and that, and then like, you failed, and then 1 or 2 people go, we can't do it, we haven't found anything. We haven't found anything that has no function. Like, we passed the test. So, you know, every plant is trying to tell you something, trying to feed you, or has a function in the environment. But we don't always realize it. And also, there's lots of ways of getting rid of weeds. The best way I think is in Florida context is to mow them down and throw mulch on top of it. You can also sheet mulch, which is put in cardboard. But I'll move on here. Am I out of time here?
We're getting there,
Okay,
so
let me-
Phil
let
has
me
time.
do this, with this picture I took. This is a Florida wetland. We're trying to enhance the wetlands because Florida is a wetland, right? Florida is simultaneously a wetland and a desert that it rains in. This ground is sandy. If there was no trees, there'd be no life. You can go to Lake Wills Ridge. It's about half an hour from here, I think, and see what a desert would look like in Florida. Cactuses grow really well in Florida, prickly pear cactus. But when you have all this life and all this resources, you can provide habitat for birds, snowbirds, human snowbirds. You can provide life for animals and creatures and be a refuge. That's the purpose of wetlands. We've destroyed 40% of wetlands in the state, 90% of wetlands globally. The Everglades is protecting us. Seed saving is super important. You're protecting tradition, you're protecting seeds, you're protecting life by saving seeds. Thank you. This is a good email for me if you want to get in touch. Appreciate all your time.
Thank you. Fascinating. What are bale seeds?
Bale seeds?
You
Oh,
said
bale fruit.
bale
Bale
fruit.
fruit is native to India. It's in the citrus family. I didn't even touch on this, but citrus is dying in Florida because of citrus greening. We actually, they're predicting this year. This is citrus season right now. Citrus season is the opposite of hurricane season in Florida when it's ripe. So they're predicting something like 40 to 50 million boxes of fruit this year of citrus, but like 5 years ago it was 200 million. So because of the hurricanes, because of greening, which is caused by the Asian citrus psyllid, what actually is the only remedy for it that they found so far is oak trees. When a lot of times orange trees grow really well under an oak tree and an otherwise destroyed field. So there's something to it. UF thought it was the leaves, someone else thought it was the shade. Whatever it is, if you're going to plant a citrus tree, try to do it in the shade of an oak tree.
This is fascinating because the guy who gave me my first bamboo that I planted at Rosebud, Joel, who lives north of us up Collier Parkway, he's got a food forest, and he took me proudly and said, look at how much citrus I have that's bearing great fruit and hasn't suffered from the greening. And I said, how are you doing this? He said, look up. He said, they're all under oak trees. So that totally matches what his observation as a farmer is.
Yeah. We don't know what it is, but there's lots to it. I think it's just giving him the nurture. It needs shade. It needs protection. It's not a full canopy. We just misappropriated it in so many ways and cut down a lot of wetlands to plant it.
Yeah.
So we can have some delicious orange juice.
Anita Bryant, a day without orange juice is like a day without sunshine.
Yeah, right. Classic Freudian thing to say.
Sugar, it's fructose that causes diabetes. And dementia, by the way. They just did a study that shows that Alzheimer's disease is exacerbated, if not caused, by the brain's reaction to too much fructose. And there's a whole evolutionary theory that they've come up with now that's being corroborated that in our earlier evolutionary lineage, the amount of effort that we had to put in to get the high-hanging fruit, which was the richest because it was in the sun, low-hanging fruit pigs and other animals would get, but we primates would go up and up. There was a lot of energy needed, and so your brain shut down a lot of its faculties so that it could devote itself to that expenditure to get up and get that fruit. You shut down memory. The brain goes through physiological changes in pursuit of fructose, and then the fructose furthers your desire to forage for more fructose. So we have the strong instinct to get fructose.
Interesting. That makes sense why people suddenly revert back to childhood when they're eating tropical fruit.
Mhm.
Like, seriously, you see someone eating a sugar apple or something, like really messy jackfruit, and they really enjoy it. Or watermelon, for example, they're just like, ah. And it's
Yeah.
like they're
Yeah.
spoiled again.
And the addiction to it, which causes us to eat more of it now that it's not expensive physiologically to get it, they say is tied to the brain developing this constant shutdown of these mechanisms and memory mechanisms. This is a physiological thing that happens in the brain, which then leads to the amyloid plaques that leads to dementia and to Alzheimer's. So they're saying severely limit your fructose ingestion if you want to avoid Alzheimer's, if your family is prone to it. Fascinating. Look up these studies. They're not
Lion's
trivial.
mane mushroom. That's the
What?
So lion's mane mushroom. It's a type of mushroom. They have a lot of studies now linking that to preventing dementia and reversing. Rosemary.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing.
Fascinating.
Memories.
Well, thank you very
Yeah.
much for that.
Yeah.
And you didn't say what Gopal meant, but
Oh, yeah, so Gopal is a Sanskrit word, the owner's Indian, and it means friend of the cow. So it's a perfect for being at USF, friend of the bulls.
great. So then we've got Phil. I'm going to restart this. Where do I exit out?